Good morning. This is week 2 of our series on hospitality, and I'd like to begin this morning by asking you a question. This question has been around since I was a youth. You may have heard it before. I think back in the day it was probably scratched on a clay tablet. It's now on the internet, and so I'm going to put the question up on the screen so that you can see it while we talk about it. Here's the question. If you were accused of being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? I want to talk about that a little bit and take apart some of the assumptions that are part of that question. First of all, there actually are places in the world where being a Christian can get you convicted, thrown into jail, maybe even killed. I don't know exactly what the criteria are for getting in trouble in those places, but I would suspect that they're pretty arbitrary. If you're a nuisance politically, if you've made the wrong people angry, or if you or your church have property that the government wants to seize, I suspect that you could be convicted of being a Christian and persecuted or thrown into prison. Curiously, it's in societies like these where Christians are marginalized and persecuted, where the church is growing the most today. It's in a society like this, at the Roman Empire, where the church first took root and flourished. So for much of our history, our early history, being Christian was illegal. But I'm more interested in those of us who are in this place right now. What would be evidence of us being Christians? In this country, you're generally not convicted for things that you believe. You can subscribe to any wacky conspiracy theory. You can be part of any crazy political party. You can believe you're a chihuahua if you want to. As long as you don't do the things that dogs do in public sometimes, you're probably not going to be arrested for anything. You can hang out with other people who believe the same things that you do. You can talk about your beliefs all that you want. You haven't broken any laws. In most cases, you actually have to do something in order to commit a crime. So, what would we have to do in order to be considered Christians? Come to church? Yeah, there are a lot of people out there who consider themselves Christians who don't think that they need to come to church. And I believe that God is out on the golf course or out in the fishing boat, and that God meets us wherever we are. But obviously, I think that there's some benefit to coming to church and being with other Christians. I also think that church should be a place for people who are curious about Christianity and not just for those of us who have already joined the club. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so I'm not going to say anything more about church attendance except to say that I'm glad that you are all here today, and it would have been a lousy day to play golf anyway. So that still leaves the question of what would we have to do in order to be considered a Christian? Now, fortunately, the Bible has some really good answers about this. And Sandy read a list of those things from the 12th chapter of Romans. I'm going to review it for you, but notice how nearly every sentence of this passage begins with a verb, a doing word. Here are some things that Christians should do. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lag in zeal. Be ardent in the Spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in suffering. Persevere in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers. Now, Paul goes on, but I want to pause for a moment and tell you a story. This is about an experience of hospitality that I had, but the story is not about me. It's about what God can do, even when I cooperate only grudgingly. Joel was at a competition late last night. That's why he's not here today, but I have his permission to tell this story and let you know that it's not something he wants to talk about with all of you necessarily. Some of you know that about 2 months ago, in early December, Joel was diagnosed with a seizure disorder. This was not really good news, as you can imagine, but we were grateful to have an explanation for what was going on and grateful to have a plan of treatment. It's been kind of a bumpy road since then. One day in particular, in early January, I was having a pretty rough time with this. Joel had been started on a medication that wasn't working really well, and I had to get some tests ordered, and I had not a clue of where to start doing that. And I was convinced that if I didn't get it figured out, like in the next hour, something horrible was going to happen to my child. I called the neurologist's office, and the nurse said, just go where you normally go. And I tried to tell her without bursting into tears that there is no normal right now, and that I don't even know what normal is going to look like when we get there. I was scheduled to be in the office that morning. I didn't really want to go into the office that morning. Didn't really have to be in the office except for the gas card. A couple days before, somebody had called, somebody that I didn't know, and said that there was an emergency and she needed to speak to a pastor. Now, when somebody that you don't know calls the church and says there's an emergency, you can be pretty sure that that's a request for money. It was. This woman needed to make a trip to Riley Hospital with her daughter, and she was calling to see if Creekside could help her with any of her expenses related to that trip. I told her that I would have a gas card for her by Friday morning, and so that's why I was going into the church, to be sure she got that card. So I showed up and sleepwalked through the morning, and just before 1 o'clock, she came in to pick up the gas card, and I asked if she had a few minutes to sit down and talk to me. I was kind of fact-checking, but I also just wanted to hear about who she was and what was going on with her family. She has a daughter who just turned 13 years old, and when her daughter was 6, she was diagnosed with a seizure disorder. And for the last 5 years, she's had to go down to Riley Hospital a couple times a year to see a specialist. So we talked for a little while. I said my son had just been diagnosed with a seizure disorder. We talked for a bit. I asked if I could pray with her, and we prayed. And then she said, "What's your son's name?" And I told her, and she said, "I'll be praying for you too." Then she left. Not really a dramatic story, but it had a profound impact on me because of how God transformed that encounter. See, it's kind of awkward to be in a position with somebody where I have something you need and you have something that I want. And I went into that encounter with a lot of questions. Questions like, is this person legitimate? Can I trust her? If she asks for money one time and we give it to her, is she going to keep coming back again and again? I don't have the answers to those questions. All I did was show up with a gas card, a card that the outreach team was going to reimburse me for anyway. And God took that encounter and made it into something a lot less complicated and a lot more genuine. We were just two moms praying for each other's kids. Now, just for the record, I think it's appropriate to ask questions like, is this woman legitimate? Can I trust her? Do we have the money to give to her? As a representative of this church, I feel like it's my obligation, it's my responsibility to ask questions like that. But at some point, hospitality is more than just doing the safe thing, the cautious thing, the most practical thing, and it has to be about doing the right thing. And I think the right thing is doing things that connect us to other people rather than things that put up barriers between us. If the questions that I ask put up so many barriers of suspicion or self-righteousness or superiority, that nobody can get through our doors for help without meeting my strict standards, we are all poorer for that. She's poorer because she didn't get a gas card. I'm poorer because I would have missed the opportunity to sit down and talk to and pray with a fellow traveler on the journey, and a traveler, frankly, who was a lot further along the path than I was. I don't know who loses the most. The great Christian reformer Martin Luther said that Christians are all mere beggars, showing other beggars where to find bread. Bread comes in many forms, and I'm not sure which of the two of us was more in need of bread that day. But if we are going to be bold enough to pray that God will give us this day our daily bread, then we have to be open enough to receive that bread from whomever God sends to us. If we put up barriers to God's love, then we keep other people from experiencing God's love. But we also keep ourselves from experiencing God's love through other people. I believe the thing that will get us a surefire conviction for being Christians is sharing Christ's love, showing other beggars where to find bread. Here's some more things that the Apostle Paul says will get you busted for being a Christian. Bless those who persecute you. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Don't claim to be wiser than you are. If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Hospitality is having faith that there is bread enough for all of us. Enough to share with another beggar when they're hungry, and rejoice when we're invited to a feast. Sometimes we have to associate with the lowly. Sometimes we are the lowly. I wish you bread for the journey, and I pray that we share that bread with other beggars and are humble enough to accept what they give to us. Above all, I hope that we'll always act in ways that get us in trouble for being Christians. Amen.